Welcome everybody to 3 Count Commentaries. I am MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about Bubba Ray Dudley's comment on Twitter, which says that AEW has no direction. So the comment goes, unfortunate, but AEW as a product is lost. There's certainly some bright spots, the talent, but as a company lacks definitive direction. Is what it is. A company owned and operated by a fan with lots of money. TK, good guy, good heart, not a booker. And the boys know it. So, we're going to take this apart piece by piece because I think it deserves a little bit more than the 1 minute that I was planning to give it. For instance, he says that the product is lost because it lacks a definitive direction. I think this is also true of WWE, but yes, I agree. When you ask who the top stars are of AEW, it's the same people that it was 4 years ago. All right, it's the same people. Now, you can say, well, there have been eras where guys have lasted for a long time, especially in the territories, guys will be on top for decades. I get that, but at the same time, we have been, I guess you could say, accustomed to a certain level of change. That when things happen in wrestling, there is a substantial shift in the culture, or whatever the case may be. We undergo a different era. And then people can look back, especially in WWE, we can look back on those eras as things that we liked or things that we didn't like. Now, AEW has the benefit of not being around that long, so they don't have a lot of bad eras like the New Generation era, for instance, or the PG era. But they have been around long enough to really shuffle the deck and show us not just who their top guys are now, but who their top guys are going to be in the future. At best, AEW can be broken down to AEW before CM Punk, AEW during CM Punk, and AEW after CM Punk, which, is about a 2-year stretch in each direction. It's about 2 years before CM Punk came in, from 2019 to 2021, the 2 years that he was there, from 2021 to 2023, and then the 2 years since. You can break it down in eras that way, but it's the same guys on top when Punk was there and when he wasn't there. Now, their hottest period is when Punk was there. That's when they had the best buzz, the most fan interest. He took them to the next level. That was AEW's second gear. All right. The first gear was pretty damn good because people were aggravated about the main roster of WWE. They were energized by NXT, and I think NXT set the standard that AEW would follow. But when CM Punk, a big star, joined all the indie guys, and then, of course, later on, you had Danielson and Adam Cole, and it seemed like AEW had stars upon stars upon stars, that this was going to be fantastic. And then what happened? Well, they failed to get Adam Cole over. Danielson was voluntarily losing to everybody. He wanted to wrestle everybody too, because he just cared about wrestling. He didn't care that much about marketing and promotions and putting AEW on a different level. Punk tried to do that stuff and was rebuffed because the guys who are running the company, or the guys who are at the top level of the company, want things to operate a certain way. All right. And Punk was bucking up against what they wanted. He was bringing in his own guys. He was given an office job, whole 9 yards. They weren't going to get along. They had two separate visions for what they wanted AEW to be. And those visions were separated by Dynamite and Collision. When on pay-per-views they had to cross-promote, they had to work together, there was more issues and Punk was ousted. Now we've seen that Dynamite and Collision are essentially the same show. People don't really watch Collision. People still watch Dynamite because it's the A show. But what about Dynamite gets you to watch it every week? This would be the product's direction. Well, the Death Riders were supposed to give the company direction. It was supposed to be their version of the Bloodline story, an overarching angle that really pushed the company forward, similar to the NWO. But it didn't work that way. And when that didn't work, and it was actually bringing the show down the more that they were on it, and the fact that the company refused to move away from guys like the Young Bucks, they were still featuring them heavily. Even though they weren't around as much, they were still being featured. People wanted to see Will Ospreay. People wanted to see Swerve. This was their opportunity to move these guys to the top of the card, and they kind of did. You know, Ospreay main evented some pay-per-views. Swerve was the world champion. You could say, look, they tried to make new stars. They made new stars. Okay, they made one. That would be a Swerve. But for the most part, they haven't really done much in terms of investing in other people outside of their core guys of Hangman, Moxley, Jericho, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. Right? It's been the same guys over and over again. You could say that Toni Storm bloomed in this last 2 years. She started being able to carry the women's division, and you had Mercedes Moné, and now their women's division is better than ever. I would argue against that. They have the same women at the top for 2 years, and the rest of the women have not benefited as much from the increased attention of the women's roster. Willow Nightingale's in the same position she was in. You brought in Megan Bain, beat her. Now she's doing tag team matches on Collision. Athena was brought from Ring of Honor. She's been champion for 1,000 days. She beat nobody of note. Nothing matters. So the company doesn't really have a direction. You don't really have, they're still trying to grasp at straws. Now, you could say the Death Rider story is still going on as time of recording. They're trying to make the most out of Darby and Moxley. Okay, but Darby's been there since the beginning. Remember, CM Punk came in and said that he wanted to make Darby Allin a star. This was in 2021, 2022. And they put Darby Allin with Sting throughout Sting's entire last run. This isn't some new star that they're trying to get over. This is a guy they've been pushing since 2019. So I agree with him on that front. This company definitely lacks direction. Now, when he says there's certainly some bright spots in the talent, I would give it a thumbs in the middle. I don't think we've ever seen in a major wrestling company so many top stars out with major injuries. Yes, we've seen guys go on vacation and be gone for a while. Guys have been, but AEW currently has Adam Cole, who was brought in as a top star, who is probably out forever at this point in time. I don't think he's ever coming back, if we're being honest. Then you have Ospreay, out with a neck injury. He's going to end up having surgery. Swerve, out with a knee injury. He had to have surgery. Omega, out for months at a time due to diverticulitis. I don't think this has ever happened in the history of wrestling. Have you seen so many top guys out with injury at one time? I can't think of any other time in history where you had so many guys down at once. You know, it's completely, it's unheard of. And to say that the talent are a bright spot tells me that, yes, there are some guys on the roster who I would prefer to see over other guys. There are people on the roster who are interesting. Hobbs, Samoa Joe, even though Joe's been around forever. Kevin Knight is a good one. The Hurt Business is one of them. MJF is a great one, even though he's been around since 2019. But a lot of these guys, like Kevin Knight's probably the brightest star that they have right now. Him and Kyle Fletcher. Kyle Fletcher's doing a really good job too. But AEW insisting upon Daniel Garcia, insisting upon Wheeler Yuta, that's a mistake. You know, giving pay-per-view spots to Kip Sabian, that you are in error when you do that. Okay? AEW, they're starting to do something with Bandito, which is good. I always say that Bandito had to force the issue because Bandito was the Ring of Honor World Champion, I believe, when Tony Khan bought the company. And he ended up losing it to, I think, Jonathan Gresham, and Jonathan Gresham was treated like a jabroni and lost the belt to Claudio, if I remember correctly, if I remember how that worked out. So they've had Bandito on their roster for a while. He's been around for a while. But it just took this long for Tony Khan to appreciate him. Thank God that they figured it out. But, he's starting to come along, but he put him in a tag team. They don't trust him as a singles act. They've had Pac on the roster, but he's been in and out with injuries. Can't do much with the guy because he doesn't stick around. Okada is beat to shit. He might have been the best wrestler in Japan if you even accept that as an argument. But that doesn't mean he's the best wrestler in the United States. So I would question even the talent because there's a bulk of people on the roster. As soon as they come on, I turn it off. I start paying attention. So I would even question the talent. They brought in a lot of these old, washed-up Ring of Honor guys like Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong, who the fans like. Their fans like these guys. But people like me, I've been watching this guy on TV for years. He's never been more than what he is right now, and he was never going to be. Now, when he says that TK is a good guy with a good heart, that might be true. His heart might be in the right place. I don't doubt that. All right? I'm not going to assume that he's a bad person. I do believe that he is not a smart businessman. I do believe that he does not quite understand the wrestling business. He has so much money that he can turn this into a niche product. And this is what everybody is talking about. And when Billy Ray says, and the boys know it, what he's saying is that the boys know this place is a money pit. It's just something for this guy who was a wrestling fan as a youth, who's still a wrestling fan now. It's a hobby for him. It's not really a business. If the gates go up, great. If television ratings go up, great. But I'm not going to intentionally try to do something to improve business, which is problematic. There was this big discussion. I believe it was over the week of the last week of August in 2025 about these all-star tag matches. Their fans love these all-star tag matches. The rest of us don't really see the value in these all-star tag matches. You see all these people claiming that AEW is bringing the chaos back. It's like, how could it be chaotic if everything is perfectly orchestrated because the Young Bucks are in it and it looks like these guys have been practicing these moves all week? That's for you to say that WWE is overproduced. These guys are literally practicing their moves on each other. And this is the main event of the show. It's supposed to be chaotic. It's not chaotic. They're literally doing an orchestrated dance in the middle of a wrestling ring. But I don't want to make this about WWE versus AEW because WWE is overproduced. They are stale. But AEW is the one that's suffering. They're the ones running a building that less than 1,000 people can be fit in the building. And you could say, and I think this is true, that they have been consistent. Their pay-per-view buys have been over 100,000 for 5 years at $50 a pop. Their conversion rate is pretty fucking high in terms of people who watch the show and then turn around and watch the pay-per-views. It's been pretty high. WWE is probably finding it the other way around where people are not watching the shows, but they're watching the pay-per-views. Because the week-to-week Raw and SmackDown have been pretty damn boring. And that's the same thing that's going to happen to AEW. People are not watching Dynamite, not really. And they're not really watching Collision at all. But they'll watch the pay-per-views. Because the pay-per-views have chaos and chaotic matches and blood and guys being stabbed and all sorts of stuff that they're not going to do on TV. Meanwhile, WWE does the same thing on pay-per-view that they do on TV, which is making the shows pointless. But this is about AEW. So I agree with every element of what Bully Ray is saying here. And yes, I recognize that some of the boys will stand up for TK and say that this is not true. It's not fair. I recognize that. But we have been watching this program for a long time now. I've watched every single episode of Dynamite. Every single one. I have not skipped any of them. Can tell you that the fan interest in the show has never been lower than it is right now. Casuals are not even paying attention to this show anymore. And this is where the people we said back when Punk was there and they were bleeding casuals because they weren't doing anything with Punk. They was, just putting him in 6-man tags and doing a bunch of other small stuff before the real meat of the matter with MJF. He said, well, there's no such thing as casuals. Well, he was wrong. It was a lie then, it's a lie now. Casuals are the lifeblood of the business. Casuals do not want to watch AEW. The people who watch AEW a lot are hardcore fans because that's who it was made for. That's what this product is tailor-made for. And these people are hyper online. They're very, very active on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Reddit and everything. And they talk about how wonderful Dynamite is and how it's a much better show than Raw and SmackDown, and all the pay-per-views are better than anything WWE's ever done. Every match is 4 stars or 5 stars or better. And yet, of average people, nobody's ever heard of this stuff. Nobody's going to see this stuff. And they're ignoring it. They got no foothold in the culture beyond this hardcore wrestling audience. And it's been this way for years. The closest time they got to getting out of that is when Punk came in. That's when ESPN was interested. That's when Sports Illustrated was interested. But since then, Tony Khan has built a cocoon around himself where he doesn't do major interviews because he's pissed off guys like Ariel Helwani. He's, kind of taking shots at ESPN, and, they're doing business with Meltzer and all these guys have been taking shots at ESPN, I should say. It's not Tony directly. So he's built this cocoon around himself where he can't even market to the casuals because he won't go out and talk to anybody, and he won't let the talent go out and talk to anybody. None of the talent, and I've been talking about this for years, almost none of the talent outside of Cody when he was there, Punk when he was there, and MJF sometimes talks to the media. The Young Bucks don't do interviews. Hangman Page doesn't do interviews. I mean, it's really weird. How are people going to get to know these talent? Toni Storm kind of does interviews, but she does them in character. Mercedes talks about Mercedes most of the time in interviews. And it's still 60 to 70% of the time she's been asked when she's going back to WWE. I mean, these are problems. And they can be easily fixed. But you have to recognize that these problems exist. But AEW's fans want it this way. They want to gatekeep what the company is. They don't want casuals. They want this. And this is a gradually shrinking audience in smaller buildings. But and then Tony Khan has so much money that even if these shows start to bomb, he'll be fine. What has to happen is that the parent companies are going to have to be affected. In other words, Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, I know they don't own AEW, at least they haven't been proven yet. But when Warner Brothers no longer sees value in what AEW is doing, that's when we'll realize that all of the people who have been talking about this for 5 years have been right. And it's going to take some time because right now they're consistent. Right now, they have been pretty consistent in drawing an audience, even though that audience is shrinking. They're holding their audience. They've been converting over to pay-per-views. They got a nice little spot on Max. Everything is working out fine for now. But when Warner Brothers Discovery looks and says, we're paying you guys X amount of dollars, we need something out of this too, It doesn't matter how much money Tony Khan has at that point. If Warner Brothers Discovery does not want them, they have to go find somewhere else. But until that happens, AEW is going to be fine. So, however long their contract is, I think it said it's 5 years. They're locked in for 5 years. They're going to be fine for at least the next 4. We'll have this discussion again in 2030 or whatever. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.